Hey everybody, Cole here with Classic Mini DIY, and on today's episode we're doing a bunch of odd job stuff. So we're going to be re-crimping and creating some new brake lines. We're going to install this fan back in the inner cowl, and who knows what else we'll get into. So stay tuned. Today's episode is brought to you by you. That's right. Every single episode created on Classic Mini DIY is made with the help of our patrons and our long-term parts sponsor, 7 Mini Parts. If you want to see more mini stuff and more videos in the future, please consider supporting the channel on patreon.com/Classic Mini DIY, or by checking out some of my awesome merch like t-shirts, stickers, and all sorts of other really cool stuff at merch.classicminidiy.com. Alright, let's get back to the episode. So like I said, we have a few different things we're getting into today. The first thing that we're going to dive into is double flaring brake lines and attaching those to the new subframe. Then I think we'll push the subframe underneath the car and get that all buttoned back up. And then with that out of the way, I definitely want to put this fan back in the inner cowl. This time I am going to put it inside the engine bay instead of on the outside in the wheel well. So what that means is we have to switch the fan orientation here to flip this so that it's actually pulling air out of the engine bay and into the cowl like it was previously. I'm going to set up these wires so that they can be run into the actual radiator. I've got a little thermostatic plug in there now, so this will kick on automatically when the temperature is getting too hot, and then once it's okay, it'll turn back off. So it'll be really cool. And then who knows what else we'll get into. This is going to be kind of a hodgepodge episode, just because there's a lot of small random jobs I got to get done before we can dive back into things like the gearbox or engine building or running the fuel lines for the car. All that stuff has to come after what we've got going on today. So step over here and I'm going to show you guys how to double flare the brake lines so you can make your own brake lines, save yourself a little bit of cash, and then we'll head out to the car and get it all installed. Now before we get started on the actual project of, bending and crimping and all the different things and double flaring all this stuff, let's take a look at the supplies we have here. So to get this job done, we'll set our master cylinders off to the side here. You're going to need a 3/16 outer diameter brake line, and then you are going to need 3/8 fittings with 24 UNF thread pitch. Now these are common sizes, so it's not generally that hard to find. Also keep in mind that later cars did switch to metric, but in addition to the actual supplies, you're also going to need a double flaring tool. This is one I picked up on Amazon. It's got really, really good reviews. I'm hoping this works out pretty well. And then you're going to need a pipe cutter, and this is used to actually cut the pipes without bending or pinching them. Pretty easy stuff. You can also add a pipe bender so that you can easily bend turns in the pipe. In my case, I don't think that's really necessary. I think that I'm going to be able to bend this without any problem, but it is a good thing to keep in mind. Now let's take a piece of pipe and I'm going to show you guys how to bend this, how to cut it, and how to actually double flare it. It's a pretty straightforward process, but it can be a little confusing and a little daunting for a lot of people. So let's clear all this off here and let's get down to the nitty-gritty. So to start off, let's just bend a small piece of this pipe off here, just off the end, and we'll go ahead and cut this. So we're going to cut this off here. I'm not going to use a lot, just so I can show you guys what it's like to actually flare this. And sorry if the noise of this pipe is annoying. It's annoying for me, so I'm sure it is for you too. All right, so we got a nice clean cut here. That's going to be good. So we have a nice clean cut here. This is going to make sure that we can flare this in nice and easily. This tool, you just spin it around and it cuts where it needs to cut. You just spin this around the pipe and this little blade here cuts it. It's pretty simple, but you don't want to rush it. You just want to kind of cut as you do this. Just pinch this in a little bit more, tighten it, spin, tighten it, spin until you have a good cut, and then you should be able to just tear it off the end pretty easily. Next up, we're going to get our double flaring tool here. Now, first things first, we're going to loosen up this bracket here so that we can get this pipe in. So the pipe slides in the end of this double flaring tool, and you're not going to want to tighten this up yet. You're going to want to leave it kind of finger loose because we are going to use this right here to locate our pipe. So the pipe is in that little hole there, and this is going to locate it right in the right place. So you can see here, inside there, the pipe is perfectly in line with this line right here. And so once it's in line, once you got this tightened down, you're going to want to tighten down these set screws. And then you'll loosen up the locating pin. And now there's 2 steps to this process, and there are 2 ends here. Now it's labeled OP1, that's where you start, and then you use the other side to double flare it. So we're going to take the lubricant, we're going to get just a little bit on the end here, and we're going to run OP1 into this hole. Just like this. And now you're going to need a wrench here. You're going to tighten this. Right? And now with that tightened, going to loosen it back up. Take the other end, make sure it has a little bit of lubricant on it as well, and you're going to run that in. And then what you have is a perfectly flared or double flared pipe here. Now in this case, it looks like it actually came out a little uneven. And I think that's because my set was not all the way set in there, so that is something to keep in mind. You want to make sure that that's fully clamped down. One other thing that I forgot to mention is that this fitting actually needs to be on the pipe prior to you doing this, because once the pipe is crimped, you can't actually get this fitting over the end. So these fittings need to be slid onto the pipe, so they'll sit back here. You taper it, and then this slides down and clamps into place. So it would look something like that before you crimp it down. And then this slides into place, and then it can be screwed in where it needs to get screwed in. So with that out of the way, let's head out to the car, and we're going to start measuring and cutting these for the space out in the car. Now here we are out at the subframe, and if you guys aren't familiar with a brake system on a Mark I, it's a single line system. It's actually pretty simple, which is nice in this case. So you have one brake line that comes down from your master cylinder right here. Imagine this being the bulkhead of your car. It goes into a T-junction. One T comes down here, goes into your first brake. This brake line goes out to the wheel that's just over here. Then you have a line that comes around the front of your subframe and into the other hole over here and out to this wheel's braking system. And that's the whole front braking system of a Mark I Mini. It's really, really simple, which is great. Now you might notice that the subframe here is out of the car, and I didn't do any video about taking the subframe out of the car. Before it goes back in, I will show you guys how that goes back in. It's also relatively simple. It's just a matter of kind of finagling everything up under there. One other thing I do want to mention is that you might see this texture on my subframe here. This is overspray from my 3M rubberized coating, and you can see it's a nice new black color here on the subframe. So I added another layer of POR 15, so it's nice and rust protected. I didn't really fuss much about the finish or anything. Really all I care about is that it's not going to rust. It's going to last a long time because I drive this car a lot in the rain and I want it to, well, I don't want it to rust. So anyway, let's start running our brake line. All right, so at this point we have the brake lines pretty much done on the front end of the car here. So one thing I do strongly recommend is testing this before you put the engine back in. So what we're gonna do now is roll the subframe back underneath the car here. We're gonna jack the car up, the actual body of the car, so that the body can be lowered down onto the subframe. It's a pretty straightforward process, so I am gonna time lapse through it, but I'll toss up a little call outs while we're going through it, just so you guys get a good idea how it's done. So now the next thing I was going to do is install the master cylinders, but I just remembered that the plate that goes underneath them here still needs to get sandblasted, cleaned up, and really tidied up before we put those on. So we're going to have to wait for right now to accomplish that task. All right, so now that the brake lines are run and the subframe's back in, let's go ahead and put this fan back on. Now I bought this fan off Amazon. It's a simple electric fan, 10 inches, and it works really, really well. And technically, you can reverse the polarity on this, so put the negative end on the positive end, and it'll spin the fan in opposite direction. But I'm not sure if that's actually something that they recommend doing, or if that's just, it happens to be how electric motors work. But what I want to show you guys here real quick is that right now, this fan was sitting like this. So my wheel sat right here. This is all on the left-hand side of the car, so in the US, the driver's side of the car. And what was happening is on this side you had the engine bay, and on this side you had the wheel well. And when this fan would turn on, it would amplify the sucking of air through the engine bay, out through the fan, and then out the wheel well. Now, what I'm going to be doing is flipping this fan like this and placing it inside the engine bay, inside the inner cowl, so that it's more compact. It's closer to the radiator, which is going to make it more efficient, and all around it's going to just look a lot tidier. But as a result, we've flipped the way the fan is spinning. So if we plug up a little 9-volt battery, so normally this runs on 12 volt, but you can run this off 9 volts so you get an idea how it works. So I'm going to connect this up. And if you connect this like this, it's pulling the air from the back side of the fan out the front. And what we actually need is the opposite of that. So I'm going to let that finish spinning here. And then we're going to take this nut off, flip the fan around, and then we're going to install it. All right, so now if we hook this up the same polarity we did before, just pop these together here. We now have air blowing out the back side, which is what we want now. So now we can install this and get some good airflow under there. Okay, so if you've been watching the channel for a little while now, you know that you may have heard me complain about this inner cowl here. This thing is great in some ways, but really frustrating in others. And one way that it's really awesome is that it helps conceal and force the air out through this hole right here, which makes your radiator much more efficient. However, whenever you need to modify something on this side with a radiator or anything like that, it's really, really difficult to actually get in here and work on it. So when you have an opportunity with the engine out like this, you want to take it, you want to seize it. And in my case, what I'm going to be doing here, well, what I was really hoping I was going to be able to do here is actually fit this fan in this inner cowl. I was hoping it would fit, but it looks like it doesn't actually fit in this space. So as a result, we are going to have to flip that fan back the other direction, dang, and then put this fan back on the outside. It does work okay out there, just a little bit closer to the radiator would have been much better. But, oh well, that's life sometimes. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so that's going to be it for this episode of Classic Mini DIY. Obviously, it was really hodgepodgey. Hope that wasn't too bad for you guys, but I do need to get through a lot of these smaller jobs, so it's either don't film any of it or film bits and pieces of these tiny jobs that are not really good enough for a whole video. If you have any questions about the things that I did in this episode, post them in the comment section as usual. Also, I have my old AEM air fuel ratio gauge. I'm going to put this up for sale on my eBay store. It will not come with the actual like sniffer, the O2 sensor. That needs to be replaced. The one that I took out of my exhaust was completely fouled, so it's just not going to be good use to anyone. But this kit will come with a gauge, all the wires you need, and an additional little pod for the gauge to sit in. This is great for the Mini because it can sit underneath the parcel shelf and be kind of up out of the way and kind of hidden. So all of this is going to go onto my eBay store, and I'm just going to start the bid at $1. No reserve, nothing like that. So if this is something that you need, these things are normally, with all the stuff that's included, normally about $150 to $200. So you're going to save quite a bit of money. I'm not going to put any reserve on it, so whoever gets it, and hopefully it helps you out, and you can get a replacement O2 sensor for it. But anyways, that's it for this episode. Thank you so much for joining, and don't forget to enter into the Supercharger giveaway. More info on that after this and at the beginning of this episode. But anyways, until the next episode, enjoy those minis and motor on.